Hello, and welcome to Nosotros, the podcast about San Antonio politics, history, and culture. I'm your host, Elaine Ayala, Metro columnist for the San Antonio Express News. My guest today is Arturo Rodriguez, President Emeritus of the United Farmworkers. Welcome, Arturo. Thanks for coming on Nosotros.
Thank you very much, Elaine, for having me today.
The first question anyone has for anyone else who knew César Chávez is to remember him, not just with his importance to history, but with an anecdote that you cherish and remember.
You know, one of the important things that I remember is that we were assigned to New Jersey, my family and I, on the boycott back in 1986 to 1989. And César would come and visit us and be around the kids, his two grandchildren, or three grandchildren at that time, and our two daughters, Julie, Olivia, and Arthur. And
I should say you were married to his daughter, his late daughter.
Linda. And so when he'd come, there was one place he wanted to go after all the activity was over and everything else. And it was on 33rd Street in New York. I'll never forget it. But there was a little record shop, old record shop that was there. And he'd go and he had this list of tunes that he wanted to look at, and jazz tunes in particular. And so he'd go there and he would listen to them. He'd, borrow their sound instruments there and listen to them, and then decide, he'd write down, okay, these are the ones that I want. And then he would go to the library and check them out.
My God.
And record them.
Oh my God. Did he have them record? Oh my God.
It was the funniest thing.
What years are we talking about?
Oh, this was in 86 to 89 when I was with him personally.
So he was recording on cassette tapes.
Yes. Back then he was.
Oh my God, that's hilarious.
Yep. And then when we get on the road and travel long distances, boom, pull out the cassettes, Art. So here we go, man, and playing this music and that music, and Billie Holiday, and oh man, he just loved all the good, and the old band sounds too. He loved all that, Benny Goodman and all the rest of them.
That is just wonderful. You were president of the United Farmworkers for years, and you can tell us, before you became president emeritus of this incredible institution. And I want you to talk a little bit about that role as president and how your work continues today as President Emeritus.
Well, back in 1993, when César passed away in April of 93, April 23rd to be exact, none of us had any idea or any thought. We never really planned for César not being around. I mean, to us, he was healthy. He was always the leader of the organization. He was out there walking or whatever to stay in shape and to stay in condition. Of course, he fasted a lot, but he ate very well when he did eat. And he was very healthy about his diet. He was a vegetarian since the late 60s, and a very strict one, and practiced macrobiotic diet and Indian cooking and so forth. And he taught all of us about that as well, and the importance of it. But when he passed away, like I said, it was a total shock. And I remember I was driving in a drive coming to pick him up in Yuma, Arizona at that particular time, because we were facing a trial against one of the largest vegetable companies in California and Arizona. And they were suing us for $10 million. So there was a lot of stress, a lot of issues that we were faced with. César was there at the trial. He was listening to what was being done and so forth. And unfortunately, we didn't have a very good legal counsel at the time for this particular trial. And so when I was on the way to pick him up, that's when I heard something was wrong. I was listening to our radio station, Radio Campesina, and I heard this sad news, this sad music coming on the radio. And Jose and his family were taking me to Yuma and driving me there. And I said, Jose, something's wrong. Speed up as fast as you can, because back then there was no cell phones.
Oh my goodness.
So get to the nearest roadside park so we can grab a phone. I can call in and see what's happening, what's taking place. Why is all this music playing? And that's how we found out about César.
On a California road.
It was actually in Arizona.
In Arizona.
Yeah. Yep.
Oh, my goodness. But you were going, I have to remind people of the question.
Oh, yes, of course. In terms of...
you were going to talk about your role as president and then now as president emeritus. Well, although I love that story.
Yeah, I share that story because of the fact that when I became president, I didn't know what to do. I mean, literally, because I had never even thought about that particular position. My passion was
And that was over 30 years ago now,
yes,
right?
Yes. My passion had always been organizing. And César would send me out to organize political campaigns and to organize farm worker campaigns and all different parts of the state and different parts of the country for the political work and then the boycott campaigns. So that was what I really was trained and believed and understood, and I loved it. That was, like I said, my passion in terms of doing that. And so stepping into the role of president, I had to learn a lot and very fast. And fortunately, his son, Paul Chávez, was at that time president of the César Chávez Foundation, which was called National Farmworker Service Center back in 93. Mm-hmm. But Paul was tremendous help to me. And we got together quite often because our offices were right next door to one another. And we would talk through and try to figure out things. And he was trying to figure out what to do with the César Chávez Foundation, and I was trying to figure out what to do with the United Farmworkers. And so both of us, plus we had great leadership within the organization. And César had built an institution, a strong institution. He just wanted to make sure that the work continued, that he did not want the work to stop when he passed away. And so we all felt that kind of pressure to want to make sure that the organization not only existed, but that continued to do the work and continued to have gains and victories and so forth, so that farm workers, we could serve their needs as well as the needs of working Latinos, working families.
As president emeritus, how is it different or the same?
Well, now I don't have to be there every day. It's good to be back in San Antonio for sure. That was a decision that Sonia and I made when we started thinking about retirement from the...
and this is Sonia Rodriguez, who's a major figure in the COPS organization here in San Antonio.
That's correct. Yeah, after my first wife passed away in 2000, Sonia and I got married in 2006. And I couldn't believe I was marrying a woman from San Antonio. And I was very fortunate that she, God does things in strange ways, because she just so happened went to go work for one of our sister organizations. And that's how we eventually met. Mm-hmm. And our daughter, Julie, and others were kind of all trying to work behind the scenes to bring us together. And fortunately, it worked.
That's wonderful.
And we've been together since then.
As president emeritus, you are involved in some national level talks, though, still today, correct?
I still engage with the immigration issues when we're trying to do that, because we've been involved since 2000 trying to negotiate immigration legislation for farm workers in particular, mm-hmm. and for everyone else, dreamers and other immigrants within our country. But we had really kind of honed in on farm workers and trying to figure out what are the issues that confront farm workers and how do we work with the agribusiness industry to get them to be in agreement with what we were asking for and what we were pushing for.
That brings me to a question that I didn't kind of give you a heads up on, but how is agribusiness dealing with the immigration issue today?
You know what? In reality, they're hurting because they don't have enough workers. They don't have the access to folks like they used to because of all the issues along the border. And so it's very, very difficult for anybody to migrate from Mexico or from El Salvador or other countries to come into work into agriculture. So they're finding themselves short of labor, trying to figure out what to deal with it. They're not getting and attracting Americans born and raised here,
of course,
to work in agriculture any longer, even though at one time that used to be the primary workforce. It's no longer that today. It's all an immigrant workforce today. And the reality is that probably somewhere between 70 to 75% of that workforce is undocumented. So that it's a difficult situation for agribusiness. That's why we've been trying to look for ways to bring about immigration reform, but there's issues there that they just don't want to deal with.
Even though they're hurting.
Even though they're hurting, exactly.
Okay, I wanted to for you to speak about the movement, as people refer to it, and the union. Sometimes we get mixed up on which is which, or are they the same in one? Explain it to us.
Cesar had always this belief from the very beginning that the organization should not just be a labor organization, that it should be more like what he called and what we developed was a community union, one that deals with the issues that farm workers and other workers face at the work sites where they work at. But the reality is most of their time and their family's time is spent in the communities. So that we needed to, if we were going to build something strong and lasting and ensure that we were trying to meet all the needs of farm workers and Latino working families, then we had to look at multiple issues that they were dealing with. And so the United Farm Workers, our primary work was always dealing with labor issues and the worksite issues, but also we get very much involved in the politics and issues that confront farm workers in that sector. And at the same time, other organizations were developed, like the César Chávez Foundation, which was originally the National Farm Worker Service Center. That started back almost at the same time as the union, back in 1966. And the idea there was to deal with those other issues that farm workers face, that Latino working families face in our society. And so, for example, today, the César Chávez Foundation deals with affordable housing. They deal with education. They deal with radio stations, communications, and making sure that we get information directly to Latino working families in this country in the best way possible. And we have now stations in Las Vegas and throughout the state of Arizona and California, and hopefully someday we'll get them in other states as well. But the affordable housing program now stretches all across the Southwest, from California to Arizona, New Mexico, and Texas, and especially here in San Antonio, Houston, Dallas, and the Rio Grande Valley.
I don't think people knew that.
No, I know they don't. And but now we're going to develop much stronger presence here. And then we have other sister organizations like Lupe, La Unión del Pueblo Entero, which emanated from the United Farm Workers. It started back in the 1960s with Rebecca Flores, who was the initial kind of director, her and her husband, Jim, and then Juanita Valdez Cox, when Rebecca retired, took it over, and Juanita just retired this past year. So now we're in our third person, Tanya Chavez, who's taking it over now. But they do excellent work around immigration, the colonias, and trying to deal with those issues that are particular to residents there in the Rio Grande Valley.
Besides immigration, what are some of the top issues that farm workers and the union face today?
Well, Elaine, one is that still, and most people don't realize this, but farm workers still today do not have access to collective bargaining like other workers in our country. So we have it now in the state of New York and in the state of California, primarily, and we're trying to branch out and getting into other states. But another really human issue is the idea of heat. And again, most people don't think about it. There's California Congresswoman Judy Chu has been a champion for us. Congressman Greg Casar here from Austin, Texas is another one that they're looking towards how do we protect those folks that work outdoors, especially with climate change happening today.
It's going to get worse.
Oh my gosh, it's horrendous what happens. And farm workers were dying. I mean, dozens of farm workers were dying in the fields as a result of the heat. And so we finally, during Governor Schwarzenegger's administration in California, we're able to pass the first heat regulations, and then we've been improving them. Now we're trying to do it on a national scale as well. So that's a really key issue.
So it's both health and safety and environmental.
Correct. Yeah, very, very important. And pesticides is still another major issue that impact farm workers, impact their families, and impact consumers. And that was one of the main things that Cesar fought through all of his life. He read Rachel Carson's book, Silent Spring, back in the late 1960s, and it really kind of made him aware of the danger that we all face. And it pollutes the environment, It deals with the folks that are out there harvesting the fields. I remember back when, and we saw it during the 1970s when there was those special films done about migrants and so forth, of the crop dusters coming over the fields and spraying everybody out there. Nobody knew. The workers sure didn't know in terms of what the impact was. And so pesticides is another key issue that we still continue to fight. And like I said, immigration, that has to change in order for agriculture to have access to the labor, but also so that farm workers that come here and that migrate here and that are undocumented, that they have a pathway to be able to gain legal status in our country, so that they don't feel they don't have the fear, they don't feel the kind of pressure. They're always hiding in the shadows, trying to figure out, can they do anything? They can participate with their children in school.
And they're vulnerable.
They're extremely vulnerable.
Very vulnerable. A friend just told me about a case he's working on about a San Antonio laborer who is undocumented and performed thousands and thousands of dollars of work for various people, and they're left unpaid. And there's very few avenues for such a person to claim their what's due to them.
Exactly. I mean, it happens way too often. And the reality is that, here are the women and the men that harvest our fruits and vegetables, put food on our table every day, make sure that this is the richest nation in the world in regards to having access to food and more than enough. And yet, too often those farm workers, those women and men don't have enough food for their children and to take care of themselves. And so those are some of the issues that we continue to work on, despite all the gains that we've made over the years. There's a lot to be done.
I know I've called you a couple of times, and I know you tell me you're in Washington for this hearing or that hearing, and so Washington has been a place you visited a lot, and we'll get to that too, because you have a daughter who has worked in the White House for some time and now has a new role. Tell us about Julie Chavez Rodriguez.
Well, Julie is our second child, and she is just, in fact, she just had her birthday. She's just had her birthday. She was all excited. We talked to her on Sunday and kind of celebrated as much as we could over the phone. But, Julie, she grew up in the farm worker movement. So I can remember her from the time that she was walking or in strollers still. She was participating in marches and demonstrations. She always had this talent for organizing. She would come during the summer to work with me on organizing campaigns and things of that nature. In her college, she did a lot and was always engaged in some type of activity around different issues.
When she was really tiny too, right?
She was very petite, yeah. In fact, her nickname at that particular time was Juju Bean, because she was so small and so petite and everything else that, we referred to as, okay, Juju Bean. I don't know if she'd like me to call her that anymore, but at any rate. But yeah, then we, when President Obama was running the first time, Julie said, I want to go work with y'all in the campaign in Colorado. And we went to Denver to help out there, and because we were asked to. And then we also worked on several other campaigns simultaneously. And at the end of it, Julie said, you know what, Dad? I think I want to go work in Washington, D.C. and work in this administration. And so I said, well, all right. That sounds great. And so she began,
she ended up at the White House.
She ended up at the White House eventually. And then from there, she went on. She started off, though, with Senator Salazar at the Department of Interior.
Right.
And that's where she got her initial kind of direction in terms of what to do and so forth. And she demonstrated to people that she was very capable and competent. And so everybody was trying to rob her from Senator Salazar for the Department of Interior, but eventually ended up with the Obama administration. Then at the end of that, she came back to California, or went back to California, I should say. And then she went to work for Senator Kamala Harris as her state director there in California. And then, then she ran for vice president or president, then vice presidential candidate. And she went back to work for the Biden administration. And now she is chairing the campaign for the Biden administration for his reelection.
And I believe she's the first Mexican-American woman to ever run a major national campaign a presidential campaign.
As far as I'm aware, Elaine, that's the case.
So congratulations on that too. Good on you.
We're super excited, in terms of...
And I should end this by saying that Arturo and his wife Sonia are Southsiders to the core, and they returned to San Antonio and have a house there, correct?
Not only did we return to San Antonio, but we went and remodeled the same house that I was born and raised in.
All right.
And so... You saw it when it was before it was remodeled. Now you got to come back and see it laid down.
Okay, that
remodeled
sounds good.
At this point.
That's going to have to be it for this episode of Nosotros. Thanks to Arturo Rodriguez, President Emeritus of the United Farm Workers, for joining us. Please share this twice-a-month podcast with your friends. The video version of Nosotros can be found on YouTube, but you can listen to this podcast at expressnews.com under the podcast tab of our homepage and everywhere else you find podcasts. My Metro column appears on Wednesdays and Fridays in the Express News, and my email address is eayala@express-news.net. I'd love to hear from you. Thanks for listening.